I stood alone in the dim kitchen, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee mug like it might anchor me to something solid. The silence felt heavier than usual, just the hum of the fridge and the clock's relentless ticking. Midnight blinked back at me in red. Daniel still wasn't home. My chest ached not with anger but something raw. Worry. Since marrying Michael, I'd tried everything to reach Daniel. Every conversation felt like knocking on a locked door. He'd retreat behind his walls, eyes guarded, words clipped. I'd leave messages, make meals, sit with him in awkward silence. Nothing stuck. But lately the distance had sharpened. A week ago he'd come home with a tear in his shirt, dirt smudged on his jeans. When I asked what happened, he brushed past me, muttering asterisk, "Don't worry about it." Asterisk. That night I'd stood outside his door, listening to the muffled creak of his bed springs, the rustle of sheets. I wanted to push through, demand answers, but fear held me back. Fear that one wrong word might send him spiraling farther away. The next evening, he sat at the dinner table like a ghost. Michael's attempts at small talk, asterisk, "How was school?" asterisk, bounced off him like pebbles off concrete. Daniel pushed peas around his plate, then suddenly stood. Asterisk, "I'm heading out." Asterisk, "Where to?" Michael asked too casually. "Just out." Daniel's chair screeched against the floor as he left. Michael and I exchanged a glance. No need for words. Something was wrong. Later, I noticed the sliver of light under Daniel's door. Knocking gently, I called asterisk, "Daniel? You okay?" Asterisk, no answer. I cracked the door open. He sat on his bed, phone glowing in his hand, shoulders rigid. His jaw clenched when he saw me. "Whatever's going on," I said softly, "you don't have to face it alone." "I'm fine," he muttered, eyes glued to the screen. But he wasn't, and waiting wasn't working anymore. The next morning Daniel was quiet again, but there was a shift, subtle like the first crack in ice before it splinters. At breakfast, he lingered at the table longer than usual, poking at his scrambled eggs with a distant frown. Michael tried to joke about the weather, but Daniel barely responded. When he finally stood to leave, his chair scraped against the floor with a noise that made my spine stiffen. "You're not skipping school, are you?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "No," he muttered, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. "Just got stuff to do." I watched him go, the weight in my chest growing heavier. He wasn't lying, not exactly, but he wasn't telling the truth either. After he left, I found myself pacing the house, my mind replaying the scene under the flickering streetlight. The way he'd flinched when Jason shoved him. The metal object that glinted in his hand. The fear in his eyes when he whispered asterisk, "They won't leave me alone." Asterisk. By nightfall my resolve hardened. If Daniel wouldn't tell me what he needed, I'd figure it out myself. The hours dragged. Michael noticed my distraction, his brow furrowing as he washed dishes beside me. "You think he'll talk to us?" he asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm not letting this go." He nodded, though his shoulders sagged with the kind of exhaustion that came from years of trying and failing to reach a son who'd built walls too high to climb. When Daniel finally came home, his face was pale, his posture rigid. He avoided eye contact, disappearing into his room without a word. Later that night I heard him pacing, the muffled thud of footsteps against the carpet. Around midnight the soft creak of the front door snapped me awake. I threw on a robe and followed. He moved quickly, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, his head swiveling like a hunted animal's. I kept my distance, my breath visible in the cold air as I trailed him down the street. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath our feet. He turned into the same alleyway from before, and my stomach twisted. Jason and his crew were waiting. They stood in a loose circle beneath the flickering light, their laughter sharp and hollow. Jason leaned against a lamppost, his posture relaxed but his eyes predatory. When Daniel approached, Jason smirked. "Took you long enough," he said, tossing a small object, a lighter? A switchblade. Toward him. Daniel caught it but didn't pocket it. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "I told you, I'm done." Jason stepped closer, his smile vanishing. "That's cute, man. Real cute." He gestured to the others who closed in like a pack. "You think this is a game?" You think we let people walk away? My breath caught. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. I'm not doing this anymore, he said, louder now though his voice wavered. Jason laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You owe us, bro. And debts don't just disappear. I couldn't watch anymore. Stepping into the light, I called out. He doesn't owe you anything. The group froze. Jason's eyes narrowed, his grin twisting into something dangerous. Who the hell are you? My name's Isabella, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And you're going to leave him alone? One of the other boys snorted. Or what? You gonna call the cops? Actually, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Jason's face darkened. You don't get to play hero here, lady. This ain't your business. It is my business, I snapped. Daniel's my family. And if you think I'm going to stand by while you threaten him, you've got another thing coming. Daniel's eyes darted between us, his face a mask of panic. Isabella, just go home, he pleaded. But I held my ground. Not without you. Jason took a step toward me, his jaw tight. You really want to mess with us? I really do, I said, my finger hovering over the keypad. For a moment no one moved. Then the sound of sirens split the night. Jason cursed, his bravado crumbling. This ain't over. He hissed at Daniel before disappearing down the alley with his crew trailing behind. When they were gone, Daniel sagged against the wall, his breath coming in shaky gasps. I approached slowly, my heart aching at the raw fear in his eyes. They'll come back, he whispered. They always do. They won't, I said firmly. Not if we make sure of it. He shook his head, tears brimming. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop this. I pulled him into a hug, his stiff body gradually relaxing against mine. You don't have to stop it alone, I murmured. We're here for you. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and meetings. I insisted we go to the police, and though Daniel resisted at first, he eventually agreed. The officers listened carefully, taking notes, promising to patrol the area. Jason and his gang were arrested on unrelated charges, their threats dissolving into empty echoes. At home the change was slower but real. Daniel started joining us for meals again, his silence less suffocating. One afternoon I found him in the garage with Michael, tinkering with his bike. Their laughter, tentative but genuine, echoed through the open door. Later that week I handed him an envelope. I found this in your mom's things, I said softly. I think you should have it. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letter, his mother's neat handwriting filling the page. Tears spilled over as he read, his shoulders shaking. She believed in me, he whispered. She still does, I said, sitting beside him. And so do we. He didn't say thank you, words weren't his strong suit, but the way he looked at me, the small grateful smile he offered told me everything. The house felt different now. Lighter. Not perfect, not yet, but healing. Together. The days after the arrest felt like walking through fog, uncertain but lighter. Daniel moved through the house like he was testing the ground, wary but no longer braced for impact. He still had quiet moments, the kind where his gaze would drift to the window and his jaw would tighten, but the tension no longer lived in his bones the way it used to. One afternoon I found him in the garage with Michael again. They were hunched over Daniel's bike, grease smudged on both their hands, laughter bubbling up between them like it had before. The sound startled me. It had been so long since I'd heard Daniel laugh, real laughter, not the hollow kind he used to fake when he wanted to pretend everything was fine. Michael caught my eye over the workbench, his face soft with something I hadn't seen in years: pride, relief, hope. He gave me the smallest nod as if to say, he's coming back to us. That night I sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table, the remnants of dinner cooling between us. He pushed his plate away, his fingers tracing the grain of the wood. Why did you follow me? He asked suddenly, his voice low. You didn't have to get involved. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Because I'm your family, I said simply. And family doesn't walk away when things get hard. He was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the window where the moonlight spilled in. Then softly he muttered, I thought I was alone. After Mom died, I didn't know how to feel normal again. Jason made it easy for a while. Like I belonged somewhere. His throat bobbed. But it wasn't real. No, I agreed gently. But this is. He looked at me then really looked at me and I saw the cracks in his armor, the grief, the guilt, the fear, but also the flicker of something stronger beneath it all. Hope. The next morning Michael handed Daniel a small wrapped box. For you, he said, his voice gruff but warm. Daniel hesitated, then peeled back the paper. Inside were a set of tools, sleek, polished, and clearly chosen with care. His eyes widened. Dad, these are good ones, Michael interrupted, shrugging like it was no big deal. Thought you'd need them. For the bike. Or anything else. Daniel's fingers hovered over the wrenches, his throat working. Thanks, he whispered, voice thick. Michael nodded, clapping a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You're not alone in this, kid. Later, as I passed Daniel's room, I heard him on the phone. No, man, I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah, I know it's a risk. But I'm done. A pause. A slow exhale. I've got people who care about me now. I'm not going back. My chest swelled. The letter from his mother arrived 2 days later. I'd found it tucked inside an old photo album, the envelope yellowed with age. I recognized her handwriting instantly, neat, looping, deliberate. I'd held onto it for years, waiting for the right moment. I handed it to Daniel after dinner, my palms damp. She left this for you, I said softly. He stared at it like it might vanish if he touched it. Then slowly he unfolded the paper. His shoulders stiffened as he read. The words were simple but deliberate. Asterisk, Daniel. If you're reading this, I hope you know how proud I am of you. You've always been strong even when you didn't feel like it. Life isn't easy and I know you'll face things I can't protect you from. But I believe in you. You're not alone even when it feels like it. I'll always be with you. In the quiet moments, in the hard ones, in the good ones too. Keep going. Keep fighting. And don't forget to let people in. Love. Mom. Asterisk. Tears spilled over before he could stop them. He pressed the letter to his chest, his breath shuddering. She believed in me, he whispered. She still does, I said quietly. He didn't say anything else, just sat there with the paper clutched in his hands, his shoulders trembling with the weight of it. But this time he didn't push me away when I pulled him into a hug. The house felt different now. Not perfect, never perfect, but healed in ways I hadn't dared to hope for. Meals were shared again. The silence broken by conversation instead of tension. Daniel joined us for breakfast, lingering over cereal and toast, asking about Michael's day at work. One evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me. You didn't have to do all this, he said. You didn't have to take me in. You didn't have to follow me that night. I smiled, nudging his shoulder. Maybe not. But I wanted to. He looked at me, his eyes clearer than they'd been in years. Thanks, he said, the word raw with meaning. You don't have to thank me, I replied. You're family. That means something. He nodded, his gaze drifting to the horizon. For once he didn't seem like he was looking for an escape. Just looking. The weeks that followed felt like watching a storm finally break. The tension that had gripped our house for years began to unravel. Thread by thread. Daniel wasn't suddenly fixed. He was still quiet, still carried shadows from the past, but he started to stay. In the mornings he lingered at the kitchen table with his cereal, flipping through the comics section of the newspaper. I didn't even know Michael still read. At night he'd sit on the porch with us, his long legs curled under him, listening as Michael told stories about his own teenage years. Stories I'd never heard before, filled with mistakes and laughter and lessons learned. One Saturday, I found Daniel in the garage, hunched over his bike with a wrench in hand. Michael stood beside him, sleeves rolled up, guiding his hands as they tightened the chain. The sight of them together, shoulder to shoulder, laughing over a shared joke, made my chest tighten in a way it hadn't in years. You're not gonna strip the bolt, are you? I teased, leaning against the doorway. Daniel grinned, his first real one in months. Nah. Dad's got it covered. Michael ruffled Daniel's hair. The gesture tentative but affectionate. Kid's a natural, he said, pride bleeding through his usual gruffness. That afternoon Daniel asked me something I never expected. Can we go through Mom's stuff together? I want to see what else she left. We spent the next few hours on the attic floor, sunlight filtering through dusty windows as we sifted through boxes. He held her old photo albums, tracing the edges of pictures with his thumb. She used to hum when she cooked, he murmured half to himself. This song about the ocean. She said it reminded her of when we lived by the beach. I remember, I said softly. She'd sing it to you when you were little. You'd dance around the kitchen in your socks. He laughed, a sound so light it startled me. I don't even remember that. I handed him another envelope, this one thicker than the first. Inside was a stack of letters, some addressed to him, others to Michael, and a few to me. His mother's voice spilled from the pages. Dear Daniel, I hope you're still chasing sunsets. Michael, don't be too hard on him, he's just like you. Isabella, thank you for loving my boys when I can't. Tears blurred the ink as Daniel read. She knew, he whispered. She knew we'd need this. She did, I agreed. And she knew you'd be ready to hear it. By spring, the house had become a place of presence again. No more hollow silences or half-finished conversations. Daniel started joining us for family dinners without prompting, sharing stories about his friends at school, his tentative plans for college. One evening he dropped a bombshell between bites of lasagna. I'm thinking about applying to a tech school. Dad said he knows a guy who works at an auto shop. Michael nearly choked on his water. You're serious? Daniel shrugged, but his eyes were bright. Yeah, I mean if you're okay with it. Michael's voice cracked as he said, your mom would have loved that. Later, I caught Daniel in the garage, polishing the tools Michael had given him. He looked up, catching my eye. I used to think after she died I thought I had to figure everything out alone, he said quietly. Like I didn't get to grieve because I had to be strong. You are strong, I said, sitting beside him on the workbench. But strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about letting people help you carry it. He nodded, his fingers tightening around the wrench. Thanks. For everything. You don't have to thank me, I said, bumping his shoulder playfully. You're stuck with me, remember? He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. The final test came one humid evening in late May. Daniel was in his room. The door cracked open as he video called a friend about some project they were working on. Michael was in the living room, snoring over the newspaper. I sat at the kitchen table folding laundry when Daniel's voice cut through the calm. Hey, Isabella? I looked up. He stood in the doorway, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. What's wrong? He hesitated. This number just texted me. It's Jason's cousin. He says they're out of jail. That they remember I owe them. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. Let me see. The message was short. Asterisk, we're back. Time to settle up. Asterisk. Daniel's hands trembled. I don't want to drag you into this again. You're not, I said firmly, standing. We're calling the police. Right now. He nodded, relief and fear warring in his face. Okay. An hour later the officers arrived, their presence as reassuring as the first time. They took screenshots, filed reports, and promised extra patrols. As they left, Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. They can't touch me here, he said, more to himself than anyone. No, I agreed. You're safe. On the first day of summer we drove to the beach. Daniel's mother's favorite place. The air smelled like salt and possibility. He walked ahead of us, kicking at the waves, his sneakers already soaked. Michael trailed behind, carrying the cooler with one hand and holding my hand with the other. For a moment I let myself imagine her there with us. Laughing at Daniel's terrible sandcastle, teasing Michael for burning the hot dogs, squeezing my hand in silent thanks. Daniel turned to us, his face lit by the sun. She would have liked today, he said. She does, I replied, smiling. Because love doesn't end. It shifts, reshapes, finds new ways to hold you. And sometimes it takes a storm to remind you that you're not alone in the dark. We weren't perfect, but we were together. And that was enough.